We are ready to go. Thanks, everybody, for joining. My name is Tim McMullen. I'm joined by Jason, Brad, and Colin today. They're going to be helping me with answer questions and kind of keep me on track. So the message today is how to make LLMs and AI in general more precise. But before we get to that, I just want to go over a couple of quick housekeeping things. The Q&A is open. The chat is not. So if you want to ask a question, and we encourage you to, please go ahead and use the Q&A that is down in the Zoom toolbar there at the bottom middle of the Zoom window. And we'll try to get those all answered. We're keeping these events to 30 minutes because that means Jason and I have to keep focus, which is awful tough for us. So we appreciate everybody carving out the time for us. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, one other thing, we're having some lovely Oklahoma weather this morning, and there's a slight possibility that we'll lose power in the middle of this thing, especially the way my luck has been going. We lost some UPS backup battery backups a couple of weeks ago, and they're being replaced on Saturday. So if by some chance this thing just disappears, we will bring it right back on as the generators come up. So my apologies in advance if that happens, and I'll try to reach out on email if that happens as well. Okay. All right. So again, welcome to everybody. For those of you who don't know us, we're BIS, and we're Business Imaging Systems is the formal name. We just go by BIS now, and we make a product called Grooper. And it is an intelligent document processing platform. So we've been around since the late 80s and got our start in the microfilm conversion space. So we've been doing this a very long time. And as you can imagine, there's a big journey that comes from converting microfilm to, or actually scanning microfilm to where we are today, which is what we're really calling knowledge integration. And that's really kind of the subject I'm going to cover today. So we built Grooper a little over a decade ago, and we've always had a focus on AI. It was one of the things that broke us away from the crowd when it came to making our own product. But AI has taken on a new meaning the last 2 years. Right now, all really people think about when they think of AI or they hear about AI are large language models or LLMs, and it's for good reason, right? These things are enormously trained models about that have trillions of objects that have been trained on them, so they understand very wide subjects, right? And I'm sure everybody's if you were attracted to my email sent out on this, you get it. These are amazing pieces of technology, and we've used them for data extraction for the past 2 years. We've actually also now are using them to make Grooper easier to set up. But what we're going to talk about today is taking everything we've built, everything you already have in your corporation or your organization, and using that as a filter to make these models, these LLMs, basically respond better, right, and more precisely to the information that you need. And what we're really talking about is knowledge integration. So you have data, you have documents, but you definitely don't necessarily have knowledge. And what we're able to do now is harness these large language models to get you more precise data back. So how is that different from using an LLM alone, right? That's the biggest question we always get. And if you can go into ChatGPT, even the paid plans, and you can create a custom GPT, right? And you can give it a handful of resources. I think it lets you have about 5 resources, so it's very limited. And you can do some amazing things with it. But what you can't do is call it from your program. So you can't call it via an API, right? So you can only use it within the chat interface that OpenAI has allowed you to use. So our big differentiator right now is what we've done is we've opened it up so that you're going to be able to call our assistants from APIs. But we've also done is we've opened up how many resources you can connect to these large language models. And that's really going to be the focus of what we're talking about today, right? So how it all works is Grooper builds a vector index data from your documents and your data, okay? And then we connect resources to an LLM-powered assistant, so a chatbot, if you will. And when you ask questions of the assistant, we are leveraging the LLM to create what we're calling a retrieval plan. And this is very much like what the reasoning models are doing now. So if you've heard about Deepseek recently, it's a reasoning model that came out open source. OpenAI has a couple of them, O1, O3. These are reasoning models. And what they basically do is they think, for lack of a better term, they basically iterate on your prompt. We're doing a very similar thing when it comes to building a retrieval plan. So these are very much cutting edge models that we're using, and the methodology we're using to get better data back to you is something that's not just built into these models. Okay, so I know it's a lot of words, so I'm going to go ahead. The whole idea of this is to do show and tell. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to show you what we're talking about. Alrighty, let's see here. So Brad, you'll have to keep me honest here again to make sure that we can see all of my windows.
Yeah, I see all your tabs, Tim. You're good.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, let me get Zoom out of the way so I can actually see my own stuff. All right, so what we're starting with is this is just the Grooper chat interface. You probably haven't seen this before unless you've been on one of our other webinars. It's just a new tab off of Grooper, but it could also be, this also has its own endpoint or API, so you can actually, if you don't like our look and feel, you could build it into your own. But the idea here is I have some assistants that I've named, and what's in a name. So there's a reason we name these things. There's a reason Alexa is called Alexa and not called Amazon Assistant, right? So we like to try to play with the names here and get the idea across. So my first assistant is just called Plain Jane, and that's because Plain Jane doesn't have any access to really anything. So if I ask her what she has access to, versus you guys are all going to have to suffer my typing. So notice Plain Jane will come back and basically she's trying to figure out, what do I have access to right now? And she doesn't have access to much. So it might take a minute for her to answer. Perfect. Thank you, Jane. So she doesn't have any resources. So if I ask her a follow-up question now and say, okay, what is Grooper? And Grooper, if you go into GPT and you ask what Grooper is, it'll know a little bit of information. So you can see it gave me an answer that's not wrong. It's just not very good, right? So that's a basic. This is just like using GPT within ChatGPT or an application like that. So I'm going to switch over to something we've used quite a bit internally called an RFP helper. It's a bad name, but as you can see, we use quite a bit of this. It's what we're using to kind of standardize our responses when we're sending out RFP or proposals. So I'm going to do the same thing here and say, what is Grooper? And while it answers, I'm going to go queue up my next ones. And what you'll see now is, because this has access to some extra resources, you can kind of see those resources popping up on the screen. It's got a vector search database called RFP-CM3, and it also has access to all the wiki files, all the Grooper wiki files. So now what I'm getting is a much better answer, and also notice I'm getting some footnotes, right? So if I come in here and look at what are these footnotes, it's actually compiled or comprised this answer from a couple different resources, one of them being an article on the wiki, which it'll take me right to, and several of these being other RFP responses that I've included in this. And you can see we can retrieve these, or in this case, it's a piece of marketing literature. So we give you a lot of options on being able to retrieve those documents and then see where it came from. Because one of the challenges with these assistants is, how do I know this is true? How do I trust this data? And that's the whole point of making the AI more precise, is because it's actually being not trained, that's a bad word. It's actually being influenced by your own documents. I want to stress that it is not being trained with your documents. We're simply using your documents as part of the request to filter the response, if that makes sense. All right, so let's ask another couple of questions really quickly, and then I'm going to move on to a couple different bots. And I'm actually going to walk through what a resource looks like. Because one of the key things here is how easy this is to set up. You don't have to write any code to make this work. Okay, so you have your resources, you're using Grooper, you just simply connect this resource to this assistant, and you're on your way. Okay. So here we go, and you can see the retrieval plan. Again, we did some feedback there, so you could troubleshoot this if you needed to. And we get the story of BIS and Grooper, okay? Summarized, of course. And I could change that just like you can do with all GPT. I could put it in a different voice. I could make it answer as Batman and all sorts of silly stuff. But if I come back and click these links, you'll see it's going to bring me right to different responses that we've actually done. Actually, these are all coming from the same response where we had a good Grooper story on there. Okay, so let me switch gears. We don't have any questions yet, so that's good. So let me switch gears really quickly and just show you how the resources are set up. So here's our Plain Jane original bot, and notice that she doesn't really have any access to anything, no resources. That's the key. Now this RFP helper that I just used has a couple different tools. So we give you some access to some standard tools. So things like asking the user. So allowing the bot to actually ask the user, I need more information? Can you provide more information for me? right? And then help search is the Grooper wiki and the help topics. Those are fully indexed and those come up really nicely. So now you have basically a built-in Grooper wiki bot as well. And then load schema and load web page. This just allows you to contact and connect to external sources as well. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I have my retrieval instructions, this is everywhere in here. Again, you don't have to write any code. You don't have to write any prompts. You don't have to know anything about prompt engineering. All you really need to do is give it instructions. And in this case, this is just an assistant to answer questions for RFP responses. And another description on what my assistant is. It's used by BIS staff. Don't use any company names quoted in the responses. That way we don't have to go through and change things. And then the last one is this retrieval instructions. And now, obviously, these are very simplistic, but you can imagine how much more complex you can make your retrieval instructions when you have multiple resources. And we'll touch on a couple of those here. So in this case, I'm saying favor vector searches. And the reason for that is vector searches convey meaning. So I can actually get responses back based on matching meaning as opposed to just keyword searches and things like that. Okay. So very simple to set up. That's it. That's all I had to do. Pick a model, put some instructions on there, load my resource. Got to show you that. So my resource, I'm pointing to a vector database that we created within Grooper. Again, you don't have to do anything about that. We pointed at, in this case, we're using Azure. We pointed at Azure. We turn on vector search, turn on standard search, give it a description again, because all these descriptions are used as part of what we're building in the background for the actual prompts that go over to the large language model. So in this case, it's just describing what this is. Okay, so very, very straightforward, very easy to use. Okay, let me switch over to another one of my helpers here. Oh, not Ledger. We don't want Ledger. I want Larry. So Larry, the lease analyst. And we're going to ask Larry. I've got Larry configured with about 100 leases, I think is what he has access to. So let me go ahead and start a new conversation with Larry. Get rid of my markdown. And a Pew clause, I've been doing this 5 years and I still couldn't tell you what completely what a Pew clause is, but the model will go through, or the assistant will go through and find me exactly the Pew clauses that are part of these documents, or if they're on these documents, and give them back to me in a nice way that I can actually go back and look and say, okay, I've got 5 footnotes here, so these are 5 different leases that have them. So again, how do I know that this is actually correct? It's going to eventually, when my system decides to talk back to me, come up and give me and show me the actual document that gets retrieved. So there's obviously a Pew clause. This one's a little bit easier because it actually says it, but it would match it based on the meaning of the document or meaning of that section as well. And all of these look to be very similar. Okay. All right. So that's it for Larry. There's not too much I wanted to show on leases, but I have one of my favorites here is one I'm calling Disaster Debbie. And this is a pretty interesting use case. Is in a disaster area, FEMA comes in and has a lot of work to do in a very short amount of time, and they have a lot of very frustrated and scared constituents and individuals they're dealing with. So being able to bring something to market very quickly based on documented procedures and policies and some federal resources would be a huge plus, right? So in this case, this is something that happened in Louisiana from Tammany Parish, and the idea being here is it's only going to answer based on the resources I've given it. And the resources, actually, let's ask Debbie what resources he has. Oops, my bad. I talked too slow or too fast. Okay, come on back. There you go. Okay, so what do you have access to? So in this case, we're just going to ask the assistant, what are you configured for? What do you have access to? And it'll come back and tell me that it has access to a couple documents and some needed data here. So the resources are in structured format. Well, and you're just not going to tell me, are you? Well, this is part of the problem too. Is sometimes they like to be a little stubborn, but we found is you just ask the same question again, and it tends to solve the problem. But I'm going to move on with this real quickly. Oops, I think I'm probably better at typing than cutting and pasting these days. Hold on a second. There we go. Okay, come on, you can do this. And I'm not even going to spell it right. It's kind of the point. So in this case, the reference documents are, again, a disaster plan for a specific disaster, and then a reference to federal valuations for homes and by county, because that's how this ends up being awarded, or how you know how much money you're actually qualified for if you had damage. So again, in this case, it's the St. Tammany Parish buyout program, right? And again, if I come back and look at the footnotes, it's pulling this information directly out of there. And if I went and Googled this directly or try to get to this information directly, I might get some information back that would be summarized with this, but I won't get to this level of detail, especially when I start to come back and say, okay, let's see what documents. Let's ask this one. How do I know what I'm going to get? Because the neat thing about this is there's two versions of this. Oh, I know what's going on. There's two versions of this assistant. There's one that would be for the constituents to use. I've had a disaster. I'm up on your website. I'm already flustered, obviously, because I've had a serious loss. I don't know what I'm looking for, right? I don't know how to get started. Now it's just simple. I can just simply ask the bot in this case, how do I get started, right? Let's see. How can I determine and type this? Notice I'm not even referring to the program in this case. I'm just saying this program because it knows it only has access to one program. So there's this side of it, which is the end user piece or the constituent piece. But then there's also the challenge in these environments where I've thrown a bunch of caseworkers, temporary workers a lot of times at this, and they're not necessarily up to speed. Right off the bat. So there's a training that they have to go through, and obviously time is of the most essence. So at the same time, this can be used, and it could be the same bot, but it could be a slightly different bot that has access to more resources that somebody working the claim could actually use to answer questions as they come in. So in this case, we got a very good information here on, okay, I need to have my property appraisal, I need duplication of benefits. There's somewhere in here you got to prove who you are, things like that. So let me see if I can find how. Oh, here we go. I'll have to type these because I can't copy and paste into this one, Jason. That's what was going on there. Was the area. Area. Spelled Tammany wrong. This is the one that gets me. Parish. All right. So pretty specific question. And this is referring to there's another document that it has to go off and check. This is a federal document. Could be a website, and that it'll go off and pull this from and find, how do I know this is right? Well, I'm going to go look at it and see. And this is hard to see, but it is in there and it should be highlighted. But boy, my eyes are getting too bad to be able to tell that. So, but the point being, what you're getting back here now is you're getting the reference document from wherever that is, whether that was part of your own system, whether that's been referred to externally on a website, or whether that's a database, whatever that link coming back. This is how you trust the AI, is by getting something back that says, okay, this is where I found that information. Okay, still no questions. So we're going to move over to what time we got. Okay, I got 10 minutes. All righty. So we're going to switch over from Disaster Debbie to one of my favorites here. Let's go to Mike from HR. So we jokingly built this. Our HR director is named Mike, and we threw all our policies up here, and we have basically the ability to ask our HR policy questions, or HR policies questions, and figure out what they are. So what is our PTO policy? Now, obviously, this is the kind of thing that you can't get from the internet. It doesn't know BIS's PTO policy or any of our internal policies, right? And this is where we see that these assistants are going to be hugely helpful, as every department could have its own info bot that basically people can interact with. And I personally think on HR, this is a big one, because there's a lot of things that people would ask of an assistant that they're not going to go ask of a human for obvious reasons, right? Where this would be really nice to say, hey, what's my policy around, mental health? What's my policy around my insurance? So again, I get a footnote back so I can actually see the different policies that it came into and where those come from. And as I click on them, it'll bring me right to that section where it found it. Okay. And again, we're doing this matchup of the data because this document is not stored in that quote vector indexed database. The vectors are. So when we come back, we get the meaning, we make the response, and then we have to say, okay, where did you get that? And then we have to tie that back so you can see that. Okay. All righty. So we're going to get into our last quick one. I have, for lack of a better name, Carl, the credit union expert. So Carl and I have had a lot of time together over the last couple of weeks. This is a resource of, well, let's ask Carl what resources they have. So when I originally did this demo, and this was for Tinker Federal Credit Union, I did this. There's a couple of people on the phone, I think, that were on that demo. Let's see if it gets down to it. There we go. So what I did is I went out and used a newer part of Grooper where we can import data from an external source, in this case, a website. And I went and did a simple crawl of some of their website pages and cleaned them up. And that brings us to an important part here, something called data curation. So we have to actually, you can't just pull in a website and expect it to to separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, because there's a lot of repeating header and footer data on every web page, right? So we've given tools, Grooper has tools to curate data and clean up data. It's what we've always done, right? You're trying to get specific data out of an entire contract. It's what we're really good at. So we've tuned those also to doing websites. So in this case, what I did is I crawled a bunch of pages on Tinker's website. And now what I can do is I can ask him some simple questions like, what kind of account can I open? Okay. And you can see it very quickly. It comes back. Now, again, if I Google this, I'm not going to get such a specific answer back, especially if I start asking things like, what is a bridge loan? Something I knew nothing about, but I might use one day. Okay, so I get a full answer there. And then my favorite one here is, who do I contact to open a commercial account? You're on these websites and they've gotten just overwhelming now, right? And all I want to know is, who do I need to talk to? And credit unions especially do a really exceptional job of getting that information up front for you. But still, if I've got 1,300 pages of a website, it's hard for me to find this out. So in this case, we've indexed these pages. So not only am I getting this back, if I look at the footnotes, you can see where it's found this information, because here's the commercial lending page, right, that we've pulled in. And they've generously given us all their employees or their business employees' contact information there. And we brought it back right to front. And if I Google, who do I talk to at a commercial account for Tinker, I'm not going to get this same response back. Okay. All right. So we're about to the end of what we want. So I want to open up for questions. And I see that we have one that came in asking about, do customers capture data Grooper-wise and then place the solution totally interactive company infobot? Yeah. And so the stored solutions would be slightly pro-offer. Do you want to clarify that a little bit? Because what we're doing on the storage solutions, now the change here is you keep your documents once you bring them into Grooper. You keep them in Grooper. You're going to want to start keeping your documents and data in Grooper, even though you may still have it sitting off. Go ahead.
I think what the question is, at least how I interpret it, Tim, is, can we curate your data to kind of create a knowledge source? So that could be a series of PDF files about instruction manuals on how to fix things. It could be also a database that has some transactional data, accounting information, CRM data. It could be any number of things, a website on compliance around how to process claims files, or child support services and when you can garnish wages, things of that nature. But then I think the question is, can I take an actual document and ask it questions about the document associated with the data I've curated? And so I've got a garnishment thing that came in that says, hey, I want to garnish my husband's wages. He's a deadbeat dad. He hasn't paid his child support in 6 months. It looks at that data and comes back and says, yes, you absolutely can garnish his wages, and here's why. So that it's applying the answers to the document specifically, not the ones that you curated and created the knowledge around, but specifically around a transactional document that you need knowledge around right now. It's what we call knowledge empowerment. And the short answer is yes, that's exactly what we're doing with Grooper.
Right. And I'm not prepared to show that, but we can do that in another one, because I think this is broken in my version. But what you can do is, from the search page now, when I get a search match based on something, I can now grab this document and say, hey, you know what? I want to chat with this document. So what you can do even more is, instead of the way I was doing it, is starting with the chat and starting with all of the resources that assistant is configured with. In this case, I'm just sending this one document back to that assistant, so I can ask it specific questions, right?
Yeah, one of the use cases we're working on right now is it's a pretty big opportunity. I don't know if we'll be able to move forward with it or not, but I like the use case, and it's around FEMA relief funds for a particular state that was hit by natural disaster. And what they have to do is, these caseworkers have to go in and they have to prove ownership, occupancy, and income, and also verify if you were getting any kind of duplication of benefits. And you're submitting stuff from an iPhone potentially, old power bills or utility records, any kind of information that you might still have available to you. And that caseworker has to review that information, and then, based on laws and regulations and guidelines set by FEMA and the federal government, they have to determine if you are or are not eligible for these funds and how much you're eligible for. Well, we can curate all the data that we need to create this virtual FEMA assistant or caseworker, and then take those documents that were submitted and say, well, you're missing something. We're able to verify ownership, but we can't verify occupancy, because those are two different things. We need this to be able to verify that, so you can communicate back. And the really cool thing is, we can do all this via multi-channel approach. So what Tim is showing you is all inside of Grooper, but this also could have been done via email, text message, Teams, and all of the above. So you're out in the field and you want to chat with this FEMA agent, virtual agent, via your phone, via an email string, and say, well, I submitted that. And it responds back and says, well, you did, but it didn't meet these requirements. It wasn't a current power bill. It needs to be within the last 6 months. Those are the rules. So get us a more current utility bill, and we can potentially use that for verification of occupancy so that we can approve this. The goal is to allow them to do more with less, fewer caseworkers and onboard caseworkers quicker, because that's the challenge with these types of situations. A disaster hit, you need to come in, you need 200 caseworkers, 500, however it is. Well, with a virtual agent, knowledge worker essentially doing these things, you can do it a lot faster and with a lot fewer agents, physical agents, not virtual. We can throw as many virtual ones at it as you want.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, and I think we touched on that. I meant to touch on that if I didn't, that we have different deployment options. So obviously, all I've been showing is, for lack of time, is the interface through Grooper's web client. But we're able to deploy these to Teams, to Slack, to your own website. We're giving you an endpoint on these as well, so you can really build these into whatever your process or wherever you want to put them. The key here is there's not a single line of code you have to write. I mean, we're not the only ones doing RAG-based retrieval, but we're the only ones I've seen where you can connect your document databases directly without writing a single line of code. Right, literally just configuring your resources, because we can also, again, remember, we can talk to SQL databases, NoSQL databases, web services, websites, and kind of the list goes on, because once I open something up to web services, I can really talk to quite a few things out there and configure those as a resource for each assistant. And then, of course, you can deploy. You see how many assistants I have deployed here, so you can deploy as many assistants as you want. So, okay. Well, I think we're just about at the end of our time. Jason, did you have anything else you wanted to cover? Anything I missed?
No, I think we touched on everything. So I just appreciate, we had a fantastic turnout, quite a few people. If any of you are interested in a more detailed discussion, or would maybe even like to maybe kind of play around with this and talk about some use cases that would be specific to you. I see quite a few existing customers and potential customers on the list that I think could benefit from this type of technology. Tim, myself, the rest of the team, we'd be happy to do some one-on-one discussions with you about it.
Yeah, and we'll be in beta soon with this version. So as soon as that happens, we'll also open up the beta for everybody to come in, because this is where we really enjoy it, right? We get your feedback directly. And again, yeah, if you have any questions, if anybody wants to discuss this or see what we're doing a little bit more closely, or had some questions you didn't want to ask on here, we understand.
Tim,
please feel free to reach out. Yeah.
We actually had one last question.
All right.
Do we have a demo environment to access?
That was from a partner. I'll address that one offline.
Yeah, the short answer would be yes, but we can just, if you want a demo environment, you're looking for a demo environment, please reach out to us and we can help you out with that. Great. Well, appreciate everybody's time. The next one I think we're going to go 3 weeks for the next one. We're still going through which topics. I probably should send out a survey and ask you what y'all would want to see on the next one, because I'm leaning towards data curation, because a lot of this now is leaning towards how do I make my data ready for the best use in AI, and we've got a bunch of tools that we can do that for. So I think that's going to be the next one, but subject to change. Again, thank you everybody for your time. I greatly appreciate it. And everybody, if you're in Oklahoma, be safe out there. It's kind of nasty. Otherwise, y'all take care. And thanks again for joining.